Good afternoon. Welcome. There's a lot of handouts for this, and we're building on a number of classes that we've had in the past, where we started out with a list of things to focus on in each of the months of the year. So give us a call, send us an email. We'll be very happy to share all of these handouts with you. So, in a bit of an introduction to an introduction, this could get very personal. So if you are of a very delicate nature and you're frightened easily, well, you've been warned. There's a notion of each individual person having their own verse in the Torah, right? And it's something you hear in sermons, and rabbis like to talk about this sort of thing because people like to hear it. And the reality is it's true. But it's true on a number of different levels. And one of them is the one that I think you all know quite well, is that at the end of the Amidah, at the end of the standard classic prayer that we say every day, I've got, I think, one more of the Chai Elul worksheet, and that's about it. If you just pass this down to our newcomer. Howdy. At the end of the Amidah, there's a list of verses, generally speaking, that begin with the first letter of your Hebrew name and end with the last letter of your Hebrew name. And if you happen to have 2 or 3 Hebrew names, well, then it's either it's one of 2 things. It's the first letter of the first name and the last letter of the last name, or what I personally do is I have 2 verses, because I'm a bit more split in terms of personality. That's not what we're talking about here. Here we're going to look at the verse behind the month. We're going to take this in a very, very extended manner. We're going to look a little bit in the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation. We're going to look a little bit in the Zohar, the classic work of Jewish mysticism, because this is where it starts. This is one of the sources. And we're going to see that there's a verse in the Torah for every month of the year, right? And so we're going to be looking towards moving to thinking about what's the verse of this particular month. And in some cases, it's going to be 2 verses, which is very, very odd. But when you see it, you'll see how really odd it is. But the point that I want to prepare you and brace you for is you're likely to get a eureka moment, because this is how I got into all of this stuff. When I opened up a sefer called Bnei Yissaschar, Rabbi Tzvi Elimelech of Dinov, and I looked at what's my Hebrew birth month. And what I saw there, not in terms of the very complex stuff, but in terms of the verse, it was a line that I had said all my life. And it's a line and a thought that I am still fighting with. We'll get into it. We'll talk about this if you want to hear about my difficulties, you want to do a little bit of therapy with me here. No? Okay. But just brace yourselves, because this can be very potent stuff. We're getting stuff from the Zohar, from the Sefer Yetzirah. We're getting stuff that literally comes from God's universe. So let's get started. Let's get started here. 3 cardinal principles to keep in mind. I wrote these down, so I should tell them to you very, very carefully. There are 3 cardinal principles. We are dealing with what is called loosely astrology. You must remember that the constellations are just stars, and they align in the sky according to our point of view and our cultural reference, right? So if you're looking at Libra, the constellation, you see a set of scales in the sky. That's because the Sumerians did this a couple of thousand years ago, and the stars are lined up roughly according to that same alignment that they saw 3,000 odd years ago, the time of Abraham, right? Very, very beginning of Judaism and of people looking up and seeing things in the sky. They have no power whatsoever. They represent something, and they help us understand things. Number 2, what we are learning is not prescriptive. You will not find anything in the classic sources that talk about this, and we're looking at the Hasidic masters almost exclusively. There is nothing here that will say a Libra cannot marry a Scorpio, or an Aries must go into the sheep rearing business. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. What this information does is help us understand things. It helps us understand ourselves, and it helps us live better lives. And the big one is, it's the Hebrew months only. Again, going back to my personal experience with this, the biggest revelation was that I'm not a Leo. I'm 100% not a Leo. I thought I was born July 25th. I must be a Leo. Why am I not the leader of the entire world? Why am I not this big lion that roars? If you've ever met my daughter, she's a Leo, right? In control of the entire world. You're a Leo? You see, that's why Rabbi Poston is the boss here, right? And we all do exactly what he tells us, otherwise he'll roar and tear us to pieces, right? Seriously, I discovered that I'm a Cancer, and my friend here is also a Cancer, so we understand these things. These things help us understand who we are. They help us understand some of our relationships. You happen to have a relationship, either intimate, personal, or just business relationship. Why are you always fighting with your business partner? There are such people and there are such partners. Why do certain people get along so well? Maybe we can understand it because of the birth months or the month that we're in. There's a feeling to the month that we're in. So what's the journey that we've been doing so far? What I have handed out to you is one that's called the Chai Elul Meditation Wheel. This comes to us, it's got the little pictures and it's got the diagram on it. This comes to us from the tradition of Lubavitch, from Chabad. And they're talking about the 18th of Elul, which is a good while off yet. It's about 5 weeks away, at least 6 weeks away. And they have a teaching and a tradition going back a couple of generations, even to the Baal Shem Tov, that the last 12 days of the Hebrew year, each one of those represents one day, 1 month of the year rather. So what you have in that tradition is when the 18th of Elul comes along, you start 12 days of introspection. What did I do in month number 1? What did I do in month number 2? Right? So this is where it all sort of began in terms of my understanding and explaining it. You're welcome to read this, keep this, and we will get back to this when the 18th of the month of Elul comes along. Right? The Chai Elul worksheet says on top, Chai Elul worksheet. That was produced to go along with this for a class we did about a year ago. And in this, we have lined up the months of the year and the verse in the Torah that connects with that month. Right? How do you get to the verse in the Torah that connects with the month? It's a little bit complicated, but it's really quite straightforward. If you have the Sefer Yetzirah book in English, it's on page 200, there's some notes and a little bit of explanation. It comes from the Zohar, and the Zohar tells us that there are 12 permutations of God's name. The reality is the tradition of understanding this is even earlier. There are 12 permutations of God's name. God's name is made up of 4 letters, right?
Really?
But there is the whole other area where the 2 heys, right? Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, where the 2 heys are different. There are even traditions where in a Torah scroll, the 2 heys are written slightly differently. Right? We're splitting hairs here to some degree, but generally speaking, the accepted way of looking at it is that the heys are the same letter. So you have a yud, a vav, and a hey, with vowel punctuation underneath it. Right? You know how the Hebrew language works. Here comes the plug. Study Hebrew. Learn Hebrew, folks. It is the key to the door. We'll be very happy to help you in that direction, right? We have a little bit of time to spare, so we can very, very easily. I have a couple of really good methods of teaching Hebrew in a highly unusual way. So, talk to us. What the tradition does is take the four-letter name of God and find it in what we call Roshei Tevot, and we would call the first letters of a name, of words. So 4 consecutive letters that have the permutation of the name of God, starting each of the words of that sentence. Does that make sense? You look slightly bewildered.
Yes, so give us an example.
I'm going to give you an example from Tishrei, the first one. And here it's actually the last. Right? So the Zohar and the commentaries on the Zohar tell us that 6 of them are 4 words that are ending in a permutation of God's name, and the other 6 are 4 words that begin with the letters of the permutation of God's name. That's why I went to the trouble of doing that transliteration sheet. So if you take a look at that, you should be able to make a certain amount of sense. This is number 1. The month is Tishri, the first month of the year. Right? And I've done my best to highlight this on the print. Vayiru, the first word, they saw, taking the last letter being a vav, ota, her, focusing on the last letter, a hey, sarei, the princes of, the yud being the last letter, and paro, Pharaoh, the last letter there being a hey. So the permutation of God's name that is relevant and ruling in the first month of the Hebrew year is Vav, Hey, Yud, Hey. Right? Which is different from the way we normally see it. We're right here, and we're right here in number 1 in the transliteration sheet. Okay? Brace yourselves, because this is like a little bit complicated and a little bit technical, but it is worth the journey, folks. Yeah, number 1, where it says number 1 on the top here, and here where it says the Hebrew month of Tishrei. There are a lot of things that we read into and that the great rabbis of the past have read out of all of these permutations of God's name. What it means to have the Hay's separate, what it means to have the Yud and the Vav together. That's like something we can talk about way down the road. Here, we're focusing solely on the verse itself, because this is what we're told. The very first thing we started out with, Rabbi Mordechai Yosef of Ishbitz, gave us a list of things to focus on for each of the months of the year. What's the focus of the first month of the year? What's the focus of the second month of the year? Right? And that is on an earlier handout, right? And that's on where it says 12 months of focus as taught by the Me'ah Shiloach, right? A lot of handouts here. The focus of the first month of the year is intimacy. How does that fall into some understanding of what this particular verse is regarding the month of Tishri, the first month of the year? And that's going to always be a pretty difficult one, and it's going to be potentially quite startling. Just to dip into this one, the first month of the Jewish year contains an enormous amount of holidays, right? Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Tzom Gedalia, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, Simchat Torah. Pretty much the whole of the month is taken up with holidays. What has this got to do with intimacy, and what has this got to do with the text of the particular verse we're looking at? What's the context of this? Bereshit, Genesis chapter 12, verse 15. Test of your general Bible knowledge, folks. What happens in Genesis chapter 12? It is Abraham and Sarah, and they are traveling to Egypt. And Pharaoh's princes saw her, praised her to Pharaoh, and they were not praising her intellect. And the woman was taken to the house of Pharaoh. What on earth has that got to do with intimacy? We're not going to answer these questions altogether and immediately. We're just going to dip into this. If the thing of the month, if the focus of the month is intimacy and personal connection between people, why is it that the verse is saying they saw her? which means they saw what an amazingly great-looking woman she was and how the Pharaoh would greatly enjoy her company, right? To use a euphemism. The bottom line seems to be that we're dealing with, let me try and just get this, phrased really clearly, that we're dealing with a force in the universe. And ultimately, when we're looking at what we call astrology, we're looking at forces and powers that God puts into place for us to either use or be used by. The more you read the great Hasidic rabbis on all of these things, and there's a good sprinkling of them, they are going to say there is a force out there in the month of Tishrei that is different from what is in the previous month of Elul. And you as a spiritual person, you as a Jew, you have the ability to let this force grab hold of you and take you in a negative direction. Intimacy. It can be really bad. It can be a very bad thing. Or you can say, no, I'm above this, right? That's the whole Abraham story that we had in the Midrash, with Abraham being brought above the stars by God. You have the ability to access the underlying programming of the entire cosmos for the month of Tishrei, as distinctive for the month of Elul, and then you can say, intimacy, this is something good. I can use this the right way. So that's a tiny little bit of a summary of what we're all about, right? Previously, we did look at this whole issue of the focus of the Mei HaShiloach. The very first thing is, Rabbi Mordechai Yosef Lehner of Ishbitz said there's something to focus on in every single month. And our task is to match that list. It's on the individual page which says 12 months of focus. Our task is going to be to match that list to the verses. It's a big task because it's not necessarily going to be easy. And this really continues my method of working backwards, right? We've been taking the longest possible route towards understanding this thing that we started learning a couple of weeks ago. Right? So we started with Rabbi Mordechai Yosef Lehner of Ishbitz, just to be precise who we know who we are. Hasidic thinker, founder of the Ishbitz Radzin dynasty, lived 1801 to 1854. Right? So he died in 1854. And one of the most significant, most influential of the great Hasidic rabbis. He was so significant, so controversial, that people did burn his books when they were first printed, which I think is a good sign, right? If things are received well and, that fits into our way of looking at things, well, that's not so good, that's not so useful. The story is told of the Rebbe of Kotz, Rabbi Menachem Mendel. Wherever he happened to go, he came into his town with some of his followers and they started throwing rocks at him. People were not happy to see him. And his reaction was, yay, this is a place where people think, they've read a little bit of what I've been writing about and talking about, and they're reacting to what I'm saying, right? The reaction is violent and unpleasant, but this is what we're all about. It's not about complacency, it's not about sitting back and going with the flow. It's about reading the signs. And this version of Chassidut, Rav Mordechai Yosef of Ishbitz, the main student, one of his main students, Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin, he's very much into listening to your messages, tuning into your dreams, hearing the prophecies, hearing the real clear message that God is sending you all the time. And that's the big context of what we're trying to do here. What's the verse in the Bible that is relevant to this particular month? And what is the verse in the Bible that is really highly relevant to me? And it's not always going to be a nice, pleasant pat on the back. You're doing a great job, keep going. It can be a punch in the stomach. It can be a kick where it'll hurt you the most. So let's get a bit on with this. We've taken a look at the sources of the Mei HaShiloach in the Talmud. We've done this whole list of these very difficult words that the rabbis had in the Talmud in Rosh Hashanah, right? And the whole issue with the permutations of God's name is, the 12 attributes are parallel to the 12 permutations of the tetragrammaton. Great word, right? You can use it at parties.
I know I like it.
Bring a note next time, that's all. Right? The English word that you use is the tetragrammaton, four-letter name of God. The four letters can be permuted 24 times, but since two letters are the same, they are halved. And this is page number 200 in the Sefer Yetzirah book in English. You can buy this in the bookstores. You can get this from Amazon, download it for your Kindle, etc., etc. Right? According to most authorities, this is the order of permutations paralleling the months of the years. And there are certain verses that pertain to these where the letters of the permutations appear as either the initial or final letters of the words. That's an important point to get. The initial letters of the word or the final letters of the word. Here's the wrinkle in this. And here's where these are not totally random verses. Because the verses, if you look at them, appear all over the Bible. Literally all over the Bible. And from Jeremiah to Genesis, Leviticus, Psalms, Esther, 2 in Deuteronomy, 3 in Deuteronomy, 2 in Genesis. How did they come up with these verses? The verses are connected to the permutation of God's name, the letters and the vowels. Not just the letters, but the vowels as well. It's going to take a little bit of time, and I'm not 100% sure if this is correct, but this is what the Zohar is telling us. This is what the commentaries on the Zohar are telling us, that the connection is where its initial letters, it is the letter and the vowel as it is in the Hebrew text of the Bible. Where it is the final letters of the word, then it is the letter, the last letter of the word, with the vowel of the first letter of the word. Okay? Make your mind spin a little bit.
Well, firstly, what's the makor for these, for how these psukim were determined?
The makor is not the Sefer Yetzirah, it is the Tikkunei Zohar Daf Tet, page 9b in Tikkunei Zohar.
And obviously the Torah didn't have the kodot, so how does one know how these things were pronounced?
By the time the Zohar comes along, they're in a Kudot.
Right, but there's different ways to pronounce, right?
But generally speaking, no. You're going to see there's a Ketiv and a Kari here. There's a couple of them where there is how it's written and how it's actually read, and so it's complex, but it's not. There is pretty much clear agreement, certainly among traditional circles and traditional texts and teachers, that this is how it is. The differences in vowels are the means of writing them. Right, so you go back to the 800-900s or so. You had here in Eretz Yisrael more than one system of writing the vowel notes. It's interesting. It's interesting sort of stuff, but it doesn't make a difference in how it's pronounced. You can ask another question. When the Torah was written, it was different. It was written in a different script, right? So that's a whole other discussion. It's a whole other discussion. Here we're just taking. I think the best answer to how they come to this is the Zohar tells us this, and some of the times it makes sense, and you can see that the authors of the Zohar are using references, they're using different sets of words that fit and make sense. Here you're just getting a tradition, a piece of information that comes from a different universe. It comes from a different universe altogether. And if you come to my shiur on Shabbat morning at Shir Chadash, this is actually what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be learning a bit of Chassidus, Ma'or Vashemesh, that there is Torah that is beyond the Torah that we see. Right? So that's just a plug for Shabbat morning. But basically, take it on faith. Other than that, I can't give you a terribly logical reason behind it. Other than it works. That when you get to the bottom of all of this, you'll say, yeah, this stuff is right, this stuff fits. And it's like this information fell from heaven. This information came to us through individuals who have had access to Torah at its higher level than even the highest level of Torah that we can access here. Yes, sir?
When you say it fits, can you show this mathematically?
This has nothing to do with mathematics.
Well, you fine, you know, but you show it quantitatively. For example, the movement of vowels, for example, works to show this quantitatively.
I'm absolutely lost. I have no idea what you're referring to.
Well, I mean, you mentioned about the vowel at the end of one verse, one word within the other. You're going to use that rule consistently.
There are 12 examples, that's it.
So the rule isn't consistent.
There's 12 examples. You've got to sit down and analyze this, and it's
if you're
not...
going to use a rule, surely that rule should be used consistently.
There are only 12 examples. There are 12 months of the year, there are 12 verses. That's all there is. And
but once you start moving the vowels, you can do anything you want.
no, the Zohar is telling us through its commentaries that the vowels line up with from the first letter to the last. It's really not important even.
Can I show you this real quick? This is the Mishnah Brewer, and the very first page shows you how the UK K is vowelized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's the vowelization you say is consistent?
that's the vowels. Yeah,
Okay, so that's by tradition. We've an all Torah, and that's...
yeah. This is all there is in this whole system. We're not applying this to anywhere else.
Because once you let the cat out of the bag, and you give freedom for that to happen, anybody to make it anything that he wants it to be.
Totally not. I mean, you're very welcome to make up anything you want, and as we know, plenty of people have taken texts from the Torah and invented whole new religions. And I can just take a verse and say, we all have to stand on our heads, eat ice cream, and whatever it is. I can make any rule, but here we're looking at a specific set of 12 verses, actually 14 verses.
So as you're saying that the whole thing is based on tradition.
The whole
Zohar is
yes.
just making this not on the basis of rules. For example, the Malbim is going into something non-Kabbalistic. For example, the Malbim's interpretation is based on a rule system.
We're not looking at an interpretation here.
Here, we're talking about using a system that is the point you're making that the method that the Zohar has been using is something which is completely by tradition. It's being passed on.
We're not looking at method. We're not looking at anything other than 12 verses that the Zohar is telling us connect to the 12 permutations of God's name.
Okay,
that's it, beginning and end.
The point I was asking was, on what is this based? On what did the Zohar base it? If you say it based it on tradition, that's fine.
That's it. It's
okay,
that's what I've been trying to explain. That it's information that comes from a higher level of Torah. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had access to the upper levels. You look, for example, at the Arizal, right, in the writings of Rabbi Chaim Vital. There's no proof. There's no logic even to a lot of it. You just got to say, these guys had their head up in a different place, right? When it works, what we're looking at is a verse that will become highly significant, highly relevant to either the month or to you for being born in that month. And that's why it works. That's why it works. It's sort of reverse logic that going backwards from now that we have it, yeah, I understand. This is something that I really do need to take on faith. Okay? So, let's get reasonably practical We are now in the end of the month of Tammuz, right? And we're going into the month of Av and then Elul. Let's do this in terms of what is it we should be thinking about? What is it we should be dealing with in this particular month, right? So if you take the 12 months of focus and you take your 12 verses transliterated, we might be able to put this together and make a little bit of sense, okay?
We're looking at Av right now?
I say, do you want to look at let's look at Tammuz or look at Av?
Tammuz.
We're still at the end of Tammuz, right? Right? So the Hebrew month is Tammuz. It's on page 3 where I've got this sort of chart going across. Right? And the verse that it connects with is number 10 on the transliteration sheet. And all this is worth nothing to me every time I see Mordechai the Jew sitting in the king's gate. Right? And the thing we're going to try and connect with is what the Ishbitzer Rebbe is saying, join with and search for Torah. How on earth does that connect? I don't see it, right? Or maybe it is to do with sight. What's the context here? Right? You're all familiar with the book of Esther.
How can you say it doesn't have anything to do with sight? The word
Every time I see.
Rhodes is part of the verse.
Right. So seeing connects us with the focus from the Sefer Yetzirah. But the focus from the Mei HaShiloach, which is where our original starting point was, that's a little bit more difficult. Right? Yeah, I have this here. So opening up the very original handout that we did, a person must join himself to words for Torah and search after them. You search by looking, by seeing. Okay? What's the context? You're all familiar with the book of Esther, I presume. The book of Esther tells the story of the Jews of Persia, right? And a very bad man by the name of Haman who wanted to kill all the Jews. Why did he want to kill all the Jews? Because he saw Mordechai, right, who was one of the leaders of the Jewish people. There should be some of those going around. It says Yom Iyun, community, Beit Midrash, etc. And that's where we originally started, and that's where we're really trying to get back to. What is the focus of this particular month from the very simple, very straightforward list that the Mei HaShiloach gives you? Join yourself to words of Torah and search after them, right? So what happens in the book of Esther there is Haman is raised up to great power, but he also sees Mordechai the Jew, who has, relatively speaking, a pretty good position in the country there. And he comes home and he says, I have been raised to the highest levels of power in Persia, but it means nothing to me as long as I see Mordechai the Jew sitting in the king's gate. Right? Classic anti-Semite. What's the deeper thought in all of this? The deeper thought in all of this, and this is the revelation bit, this is the one that totally turned me on to this whole thing. The name of God is not on the rest of it, the verse, but the very beginning. V'chol ze einena shoveh li. All this is not worth anything to me. And, to get a little bit of revelation, this is something that I've been saying all my life. And it's a means of not doing things for me. Right? I'm not going to pick on you and ask you, if you were born in the month of Tammuz, do you have this kind of thought going through your mind? But I do. And it always seems to me that the cost of doing something, not the price, not how much money, but the emotional output, the difficulty of doing it, the things that I have to give up to do it, in a logical accounting method, is too much for the value of the outcome. And this particular text says, who says this type of thing? Who takes an accounting view? Nothing against accountants, nothing against measuring things, but who takes a strictly accounting view of things in life? Not the good thing, not the good side. Who is Haman? Haman is a descendant of Amalek. He is representative of the dark side, of the evil side, of everything that wants to take down and destroy that which is good. That is a thought that comes up into my mind and says, well, you're going to go teach a Torah class at the Ale Street Shul with all these nice people from Yiboneh, but, coming home you're going to get heat stroke. And coming home you're going to stop in the store and have a pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and what's that really going to cost you? That's the way my mind works. And that thought, I have to recognize, does not come to me from the good side of things, from my Yetzer HaTov, from the good angel on my right shoulder, but that is coming to me from, let's call a spade, from the devil. That's coming from the evil side. That's coming from the Yetzer Hara. You've got something to do, and it's being with other people, and it's helping people, and it's got a good positive outcome. But the accountant in my mind is not the nice accountant that does my taxes and helps me through life and all my finances. It's the accountant that says, the price for doing this is far too much. Don't do it. Right? Now, if you happen to be born in the month of Tammuz, I don't know if you get that kind of thought, but that's how I take it. And that's the very, very personal message that comes from these verses. And that's why I really didn't react very nicely to your question, because it's not about math. It's not about any sort of rule or logic. It's about a piece of wisdom that is coming from a place of greater wisdom than we can ever access. And for me, it's reaching in and pulling me to be a better human being, to be a better Jew, to be a more spiritual person, right? So that's why I feel these are incredibly important verses to put our heads into and put our hearts and souls into. Because, yeah, you have a question, please.
So Thomas, which is related to sight, you're connecting to being very calculating?
The bottom line is I don't see an awful lot of commentary on all of this. It's a take it or leave it. The verses here, it goes with this permutation. The Hebrew month of Tammuz does connect to the faculty of sight. It connects to the tribe of Reuben, Reuven, right? Since you know a little bit of Hebrew, that is, his mommy called him the son of sight, or see here is another son. You gotta look up the exact verse.
No, see here, my husband will love me.
Oh, because I've had a son.
Yeah, because I had a
Okay. That's all husbands want, right?
Why else?
Yeah, we only get married to have
Girl,
sons.
you didn't really love.
Yeah. This is also the aspect, this is another aspect that you want to bring into it that we haven't really gotten into in any of these charts, and I just don't want to make the charts more complicated, but go back to the name of the progenitor of the tribe and how he got his name.
Yeah.
Each of the tribes, Reuben. Why was Reuben called Reuben? Why was Shimon called Shimon? And what do these words mean? Right? So there is a wealth of material to draw on, but you have to sit back, relax, do a little bit of reading, and a great deal of meditation and thought, and say, we're in the month of Tammuz, or in my case, I was born in the month of Tammuz. And there are things about this that if we stick with this, we'll get to some of the less complicated of the Hasidic masters who do have the ability to explain all of these things. They don't consistently do it with all of the months of the year, but you've got then an ability to do what you can call in quotation marks an astrological reading, right? I don't have a better term for it, but it sounds like a very treif thing for a Jewish person to do. But here we are in the month of Tammuz, it's coming to an end. What is there about correcting the thing of sight? It goes back to, again, quoting the Hasidic masters on all of this, it goes back to the spies. The 12 spies go into the land of Israel, and they see what they want to see. They corrupt their faculty of sight. They come back in the next month, which is Av, right? And Shmi'ah, hearing. The people of Israel listen to their negative report, right? So the faculties of sight and hearing are corrupted in the biblical era in these two particular months. And if you want to get into the technically sort of terms, the tikkun, the correction of things that we have to do in the summer, in Tammuz and Av, is see things the way we're supposed to see them. See things through Torah-tinted glasses, through positive-tinted glasses. Listen to things and listen to what people are saying. Are they telling you this is no good? Are they telling you it's too difficult to live here in the land of Israel? Right? Or put it onto a personal level, onto just a human level. And Reuven and Shimon fit perfectly, right? Re'iyah, Resh Aleph Hey, Ra'ah to see. Shimon, Shin Mem Ayin, to listen, right? And then you've got to line up also the constellations, right? The Sartan, the crab, and the Aryeh, the lion. What have these guys got to do with it? It'll take us a while to figure all these things out, and it's not in something we can do easily right now, but we can go through all of the months. And you have to remember that the things up in the sky there are a means of expressing a gift and a power and a point of focus that God is giving you in these particular months. Right?
Or maybe by being born in that month comes with this particular gift. The other
Yeah.
way possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So here I am born in the month of Tammuz, and it's now the month of Tammuz.
And inherently you will have the gift of sight,
I have the ability to see.
something.
Or,
Don't see.
or put it the other way, the thing that I really, really need to work on is how I look at things. How do I, and again, if you go to the Shem Mishmuel, the second Rabbi of Sachachav, of Shmuel Misachachav, the Sefer is the Shem Mishmuel, he extends and expands on all of this. That there's more than one meaning to sight, right? How do I look at you? What am I looking at you as, right? Especially us men, we have enormous difficulties when it comes to looking at women. Sorry, these other gentlemen here are, of course, perfectly pure and good, and right? There is an issue like that. How do we look at women? How do all of us look at things? How do we look at other people? What do we do with the power of sight? And then there's also the notion, again, Shem Mishmuel talking, that I see what you're saying, right? That I understand. Or then I hear what you've said, I take it to heart. So these months do tend to go together. And if you look at what we call contemporary Western astrology, you've got the alignments of the months, how they join up together. They go either each month by itself, pairs of months, or threes, or fours, or sixes, right? So there's a great deal of flexibility here. But generally speaking, I think what the Jewish sources, what the Hasidic sources are doing is giving us twos and threes. Tammuz and Av do fit together. Tammuz, Av, and Elul also fit together. So it's the quarter year, right? From the summer, from the tragedies, from the difficult and bad times, from the 9th of Av, the destruction of Jerusalem, and then building up to a month of repentance, of introspection. And you're going to see that Elul is nothing like you thought it was. Tishri is nothing like you thought it was. Certainly in this setup. And then we build up to the month of Tishri and all these major holidays. Okay? So we're still in Tammuz. It's about sight and it's about seeing. And it's about, maybe the way it can be is seeing that things are worthwhile. Right? Because I can only tell you my personal experience. I can't tell you your interaction with this. This one may mean absolutely nothing to you. Right? And this is not the Ten Commandments. We have to be very clear here. Right? You have the Ten Commandments, and as far as we're concerned, all 10 of those are obligatory, right? It's not like the 10 suggestions, and maybe you'd like to do 4 or 5 of them, and you'll do another few of them next week, right? These are means of understanding. These are options, and these are ways of looking at things. So maybe my way of looking at things and seeing that there is a rigid mathematical accounting system of what's it going to cost me, and it's not worth it. I have to see things differently, right? And I'm not going to ask you how this verse affects you, if you're born in Tammuz, if your life's partner is born in Tammuz, or coming into this month. So the task of this month is to join with and search for Torah. This is Rabbi Mordechai Yosef of Ishbitz, and this is where we absolutely started our very beginning point, right? And it's on this. I have all of these things, and they're all different pages. But he says, yeah, it's text number 2 if you're looking at the Hebrew in the very, very original handout. And why I don't have it written out and easily accessible. Okay, we'll deal with it another time. But that's the basic point.
Just before you leave,
Please.
you said connecting months or sets of months or
Yeah.
months that have some resonance. So Sivan and Iyar, they seem to have no connection. Iyar being thought and Sivan being action seem to be of different characteristics.
Yeah, and also the months go by opposites.
Opposite. So would
Which-
you say that that's
You can have the months that are opposite each other. The first on the 7th, the 2nd, and the 8th.
Is it referenced anywhere where ER and Sivan are distinct in their
Nisan, Iyar, Sivan.
Yeah.
If we're looking at Tammuz of, yes.
Yes. And of certain resonance, the 3 weeks, and so forth, and the sight and hearing, all
Iyar to Sivan, definitely.
ER and Sivan seem to have very
Yep.
distinct differences in their life.
I am going to tell you where to look this up. Iyar is the 8th month, Taurus, the bull, the shore, thought, and Sivan, Gemini, twins, Zivulun, movement. Definitely B'nai Yissaschar, which is a book by Rabbi Tzvi Elimelech of Dinav, not translated. You can sit and learn it if you feel the urge. Definitely worth spending time with. He's the one who puts them into these sort of doubles. Similarly, the Shem Shmuel. So yeah, they do go together.
And Issachar and Zebulun are associated with these 2 months?
I have to put my glasses on. Issachar is Iyar and Zevulun is Sivan. Okay, classically, Issachar are the scholars, and Zevulun are the ones who provide for them. And you've got what precise source I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. Rabbi Poston knows all of these things, right? Issachar and Zevulun deal where one learns Torah and the other supports.
Rambam
What do you want to know, the source?
The source, yeah.
That I can look up to you, but the source is
and
written
his
all
brother
over the place.
David, if it doesn't fit, then we don't have substantiation.
Right.
When you word the Saskar, they're receiving the reward. We actually discussed it this morning about the ones who marry their and do business with Torah scholars versus the scholars themselves. That Yissaschar is the one who really receives the reward to the Torah scholars, and Zvulun is making a deal with them so they can also receive it.
Right.
The source is all over.
Yeah, this comes up quite a bit. But these two go together, and you see a lot of these sort of coincidences where things fit together. I think you also do see where the months go in 3s. and then they go in 4s because you've got 4 seasons in the year, which is a much more fundamental layer of looking at this whole thing. What's the spirit of the time we're in right now?
It's also similar to the way in which they move through the midbar as in their groupings.
Yep. Well, in terms of the tribes, okay, since you raised the issue, the tribes go in 2 different orders, right? There's a dozen or more, 15 different times there's a list of tribes mentioned in the Bible. One is the birth order, and the other is the order that they march through the wilderness, through the midbar. It lines up with the Sefer Yetzirah, it brings us to that, according to the commentary of the Gaon Mivilna. Right, so there's a couple of versions of all of this stuff, and that gives you, more room to play with, and in reality, more room for you to fit in and say, yeah, here's a chunk that makes sense to me, and here's a lesson for me.
Which is why we're dealing with these specific 12 tribes at the exclusion of Yosef, because that's made up by Manasseh and Ephraim, and also Levi, who would be in the center of the grouping.
Right. So the other reading is generally what is called the Girsat HaGeonim, the version of the Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, that is along with the commentary of Rav Saadia Gaon. So a good deal earlier in terms of time, right? The Gaon Mivilna is much more recent. It's the 400 or 500 year difference between the two. That one lines them up according to the birth order, but leaves out Ephraim and Manasseh because they're not born yet, right? Mm-hmm. Then you come to one tiny comment by the Mea Shiloach, Rav Mordechai Yosef, the Ishbitzer, which is where we all started, that really what we're moving towards is a time of 13 tribes. It's hard to wrap your head around this because, well, there are only 12 constellations in the sky, but ultimately there will be a time of 13 tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh will be there, and Levi will be back in as well. Mm-hmm. Right? Levi will go with the month of, which month doesn't have a constellation? Yeah, Adar too.
Leap year.
In the leap year, right. Right. So there are 13 months. Mm-hmm. What do we have with 13 in standard, very well-known Jewish sources? There are 13
attributes of God.
There are 13 attributes of God, divine attributes of mercy, and there are 2 versions of this, right?
Rambams and...
No, we're talking about Bible. There's one from the Chumash, right? From Micha, right? From the book of Micah. So you've got 2 versions of these divine attributes. Says the Mea Shiloach, the progress of human civilization and spirituality is going from a world of 12 to a world of 13. And that's all he says about it. So there is a move forward. So the month of Tammuz, I think we can certainly say, does fit reasonably well with the site and with the join with Torah. Let's try and read this from the individual and original text. I have one somewhere that I've written all over that would be easier to find. But our task in this particular month is Neged Chodesh Tammuz. The verse that he right. If you remember correctly, and going back to the very, very beginning, the verse that... No, this was the Talmud. This was the Talmud in Rosh Hashanah, where the rabbis were having difficulty with these foreign words. And the word that they were dealing with is in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 8, and it's to do with twisting and twirling, as in twisting and twirling your hair, right? If you have long enough hair, you can play with it and twist it, right? This is the month of Tammuz, because you have to lechaber atzmo, to join yourself to things of Torah and search after them. This is the thing that he says you got to focus on. Turn Torah over and over and over again. Right? This is the very first handout we did about two or three weeks ago. Turn it over, twist it around in your fingers, and see what's in it. I think it's not a precise connection, but it makes a certain amount of sense. And the footnote in the original Mea Shilach that says, yes, these verses are the things that he used as his source, seems to hold out so far with just one down. Okay? You want to do one more, or are we... We got a little bit of time. Okay, month number 11, the month of Av. Right? Let's go back to the very beginning since we started there. And this is on the sheet that says 12 months of focus. After Tammuz comes Av. And again, this very odd verse in Isaiah. It is Isaiah chapter 14. And it's a word that we all know, the matateh, that God will sweep nations away with the broom of destruction. And they didn't know that this was a particular word that meant a broom or a brush. Actually, matateh is a mop, right? If my contemporary Hebrew is correct. It's a broom? Okay, so how do you say mop in Hebrew? A sponge, right? Right. So in the month of Av, you have to clarify and purify yourself from all types of desires. And the reference back to the connecting verse and the originating verse in Isaiah is that each of the nations of the world is representative of a particular type of desire. And those are the things that you have to brush out of your life, sweep out of your life. Clear your mind, clear your heart, clear your calendar from time for all desires, lusts, and things that have negative connections to them. He has a couple of other ones to do with lust for money, eating, the desire to make fun of other people, lust for other people's property. But here in Tammuz and then in Av, it seems to be a sort of omnibus, collective. Look at the list of nations that are out there. Look at the list of what these nations represent, because everything in the entire world is to give you a lesson. The fact that there is a nation called Egypt, a nation called Syria, a nation called Turkey, is to tell us there is something Egyptian in the world, there is something Syrian in the world. And these things don't relate to our relations to these countries today. They go back to antiquity, to the biblical era, and to the way it's looked at in all of these types of texts.
It's like when Bacon was in a position to give back the Sinai, they were telling a politician on the right of the spectrum would do that. And he said, well, I want to get out of the Mitzrayim that the Jewish people have had for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
He used that reference.
This is actually the way it does work. That there are connections in the words, and then there are connections in what the place represents. Mm-hmm. Each country has its midah, has its characteristic. And we'll see if that turns out to be Egypt. Iran, Persia has the midah of tsarut ayin, of closing your eyes, of being stingy. That everything is mine. Wisdom is mine. The Iranians, the Persians of old, practiced extreme modesty in their dress and attire, kept their women at home. Why?
Avaricious.
Yeah, so as they could have access all the time. And so no one else could see what a beautiful wife or daughter I have. They did, and it goes to wisdom. We had this when we were talking about the 8 garments of the high priest and things that you do to make yourself a better and more pure person. Share the wisdom that you've got. Because there is the notion out there that is represented by the nation of Persia that any wisdom that we have is ours. And if you've happened to develop some new philosophy, some new science, we begrudge you having that. Right? The ultimate thing, the things you learned in kindergarten. but that we are being reminded of in a much more sophisticated manner, right? So the month of Av brings us to a verse that connects with hearing, with hearing directly. Moses and the priests spoke to all of Israel, saying, "Pay attention, listen, O Israel, this day you have become a people to God." And the specific words are hasket, pay attention, ushema, and listen. Israel is obvious, hayom, today. Right? So we have, from the Sefer Yetzirah, from the verse itself, we have hearing. But how do we get that into paying attention to all of the desires and lusts that are out there in the world? Right? So there may very well be an issue here that Moshe, the priests, the Leviim say to every Jewish person assembled there, wherever this happened to be, and whatever this particular occasion was. You look in Devarim 27, it's the end of Devarim, it's also the time where Moshe is talking to all of the people of Israel, right? Summing up everything, giving them instructions. Listen, people, you are this day a nation. You are a nation that belongs to God. You are a nation that is different and distinct from all the nations of the world. You represent purity, you represent integrity, you represent honesty, you represent all the good things, whereas the other nations of the world represent other things. Not to put down other nations. I'm sure Egypt could be a very fine country with a revolution or two, and similarly Syria, but pick a neutral country that we haven't gotten too much bad to say about. Finland, right? Canadians. Everyone loves Canadians, right?
They didn't take any Jews in the time of the war, not even one.
But I'm Canadian, so I like Canada. We loved it there as long as our time there lasted. But we're talking about an archetype. We're talking about something that represents something, right? Not necessarily even the nation itself, although there is that aspect that what we're doing, what our job is, go to a nation like Persia, Egypt, Canada, find what the spiritual aspect of that nation is, take it away from them, bring it into our holy sanctuary, into our holy people, take the stinginess away from Persia, to stick with that example, because nobody likes Iran today, right? Other than certain politicians who are now out of power, we make no comments about this sort of stuff. But you take that power that they are using differently, you bring it into our lives and use it well. What are things that you should be stingy with? What are things that you should be concerned that someone else has? Wisdom, happiness, Torah. And the way you are concerned about it is you are happy that that person has learned so much more Torah than you, and you say, I want to be that. I want to be like that guy. You look at a married couple and you say, they're so lovey-dovey. They're having such a wonderful time together. They're married 50 years and they're like newlyweds. I want to be like that. How can I learn to be like that? Right? This is the better use of it. This is ultimately what we're getting to on a cosmic level, that all of the stuff that is out there in the nations, in quotation marks, will ultimately come to us, and then their source of energy, their powers will dissipate completely and disappear. Right? But here we're looking at a verse that is saying, stand up, be recognized as a Jew, be recognized as children of God, identify yourselves as the people of God, the pure, the good, the virtuous, and sweep aside the totality of all desires. Right? Because if you don't, remember what happened. The nation of Israel was swept out of its land. as it was in the narrative that we see in Isaiah, Jeremiah, that particular period. Right? We're not talking again precisely, but the point is the point, and I think it does fit very, very nicely. Okay, next time we'll do a little bit of Elul. We'll continue this. This is reasonably clear, I hope.
Yeah.
If you're watching us on YouTube and you want all of these handouts, very easily I can send you a PDF of all of them. I think I have just about enough to go around here, maybe one or two short. But give us a call, connect with us via the website. We'll be very happy to send these to you. And we'll continue this on Thursday at 4 o'clock. And once we get through this, we're going to go to the months of Elul and Tishrei, which will have begun in a week or so. And we'll be talking about the month before the high holy days and all the holidays, and then the month of the holidays themselves. Okay, thank you for your time and attention.
Shama shir shir chadai